The briefing room fell silent as Staff Sergeant Marcus Phoenix Kellerman walked through the door, his flight suit bearing the creases of a man who'd been up since 300 with a 6-year-old. The 12 Navy SEALs seated around the tactical table didn't bother hiding their smirks. To them, he was just another Air Force drone operator assigned to their mission. Worse yet, a single dad trying to juggle military service with bedtime stories and pediatrician appointments. What they didn't know was that this same man had spent the previous night in a hospital emergency room, holding his son's hand through another asthma attack, while his ex-wife's lawyer sent emails about custody modifications. Lieutenant Commander Jake Reaper Morrison, the SEAL team leader, barely glanced up from his mission planning tablet. Great, they sent us a babysitter who probably needs to be home by curfew. The comment drew chuckles from his men, their coffee-stained faces betraying the casual contempt that special operations personnel often held for support units. Marcus had heard worse during his 8 years of service, but each joke still cut deep. Being a single father in the military meant constant questions about his priorities, his reliability, his commitment to the mission when soccer practice conflicted with training exercises. The mission parameters scrolled across the main display. 12 high-value targets occupying a fortified compound in the remote mountains of Syria. Intelligence suggested an arms-dealing network that supplied weapons to terrorist cells across 3 continents. The window for action was impossibly narrow, a pre-dawn strike before the targets scattered to safe houses across the region. What made this operation particularly challenging was the terrain. The compound sat on a ridgeline accessible only by helicopter, surrounded by sophisticated air defense systems that had already claimed 2 aircraft in previous reconnaissance attempts. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the operation commander, stepped forward with the measured confidence of someone who'd orchestrated dozens of similar missions. Her weathered hands gestured toward the tactical display as she addressed the room. "Gentlemen, Staff Sergeant Kellerman will be providing drone overwatch and precision fire support from his MQ-9 Reaper." She paused, studying the skeptical faces around the table. "His job is to keep you alive and ensure mission success through real-time intelligence and surgical strikes when needed." Marcus remained standing near the back wall, his arms crossed, observing the team dynamics with the analytical mind that had made him one of the Air Force's most skilled drone pilots. He recognized the archetype, elite operators who measured worth in physical prowess and close-quarters battle experience. They had every right to question his capabilities. Remote warfare was a different kind of combat, one where killing happened through computer screens and satellite links rather than muzzle flashes and adrenaline rushes. What they couldn't see was the small laminated photograph tucked inside his chest pocket, a 7-year-old boy with bright green eyes and a gap-toothed smile, taken during their last camping trip before the divorce papers were finalized. Little Jake Kellerman, named after his father's best friend who died in Fallujah, represented everything Marcus fought to protect and everything he risked losing with each deployment. As Hayes continued the operational briefing, Marcus studied the compound's defensive layout with a methodical precision that separated competent analysts from exceptional ones. The target building's position offered multiple escape routes, overlapping fields of observation, and what appeared to be a sophisticated early warning network. Whoever had chosen this location understood how American forces operated and had prepared accordingly. The terrorist cell they were targeting wasn't a collection of radicalized amateurs hiding in caves. These were professionals, former military personnel from various conflicts who'd found profitable employment in the international arms trade. Their compound reflected that expertise: hardened fighting positions, redundant communication systems, and enough firepower to hold off a battalion-sized assault force. Taking them down would require surgical precision rather than overwhelming force. Morrison finally looked up from his planning materials, his steel-gray eyes assessing Marcus with the calculated indifference of a predator evaluating potential prey. "Sergeant, I hope you're better at flying toys than you are at showing up on time." The room erupted in laughter, but Marcus noticed that one SEAL, Petty Officer Second Class David Ghost Chen, remained silent, his scarred face suggesting he'd seen enough combat to recognize that jokes often mask deeper insecurities. "I'll be exactly where you need me, Commander," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the steady confidence of someone who'd guided countless missions through hostile airspace. "The question is whether your team can execute their part of the operation without requiring constant hand-holding from above." The laughter stopped abruptly. Morrison's jaw tightened as he processed the unexpected pushback from someone he dismissed as support personnel. Hayes cleared her throat, sensing the brewing tension between different military cultures. "Staff Sergeant Kellerman has over 400 combat hours operating remotely piloted aircraft," she announced to the room. "His target engagement accuracy rate exceeds 98%, and he's provided support for Delta Force, Rangers, and Marine Special Operations units across 4 separate theaters of operation." The statistics were impressive on paper, but everyone in the room knew that numbers meant nothing when bullets started flying and lives hung in the balance. Marcus remained quiet, his attention focused on the compound's structural details visible in the latest satellite imagery. The main building showed signs of recent modification: reinforced walls, additional antenna arrays, and what appeared to be underground expansion. Someone had invested significant resources in making this place both secure and operationally effective. The arms dealers they were targeting had built more than a hideout. They'd created a fortress designed to withstand exactly the kind of assault the SEALs were planning. The briefing continued with technical details that would determine success or failure. Approach vectors calculated to avoid known surface-to-air missile sites, communication frequencies that wouldn't interfere with other operations in the region, extraction protocols that accounted for wounded personnel and captured intelligence materials. Standard operating procedures refined through years of similar missions, but each operation carried unique variables that could transform routine into catastrophe. Morrison stood, his imposing frame commanding immediate attention from his team. "Gentlemen, we launch in 90 minutes. Full mission loadout, standard room clearing configuration." His eyes found Marcus across the briefing room. "Sergeant, try to keep your robot airplane in the sky long enough for professionals to do real work." More snickers from the SEAL team, but Ghost Chen maintained his thoughtful silence, watching Marcus with curious intensity. Hayes dismissed the group with a gesture that suggested she'd presided over similar pre-mission tensions countless times. As the SEALs filed out, their confident voices echoing through the corridor, she approached Marcus with the deliberate pace of someone who'd made too many life-or-death decisions to rush anything unnecessarily. "They don't know about Jake," Hayes said quietly, referring to Marcus's son. She'd been the commanding officer who'd granted emergency leave when the boy was hospitalized with pneumonia 6 months earlier, or about the custody hearing scheduled for next week. Her voice carried understanding rather than judgment, recognition that military service demanded sacrifices that civilian careers never required. "It won't affect my performance, ma'am," Marcus replied, though they both understood that personal stress had a way of manifesting at the worst possible moments. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. He was about to guide a mission designed to dismantle an arms trafficking network while fighting his own legal battle to maintain access to his son. The Drone Operations Center hummed with electronic activity as technicians performed final system checks on the MQ-9 Reaper aircraft. Marcus's workstation resembled a sophisticated video game setup, multiple high-definition monitors displaying everything from satellite feeds to weapon system status indicators. The aircraft itself was 8,000 miles away, orbiting over Syrian airspace with enough fuel for 12 hours of continuous operation and enough ordnance to level a city block. Technical Sergeant Maria Santos, Marcus's sensor operator, had been working drone missions longer than most people had been aware such technology existed. Her expert hands moved across control interfaces with the precision of a concert pianist, adjusting camera angles and sensor parameters to provide optimal battlefield awareness. "Phoenix, we've got crystal clear imagery on the target compound," she reported. "Thermal shows significant personnel movement inside the main structure." Marcus settled into his pilot's chair, running through pre-engagement checklists with the methodical thoroughness that kept expensive aircraft operational and friendly forces alive. The Reaper was a predator disguised as an intelligence platform, sleek, patient, and absolutely lethal when circumstances required violence. Unlike the SEALs who would soon be risking their lives on the ground, Marcus would experience the entire mission through computer screens and radio transmissions, separated from immediate danger by thousands of miles and satellite technology. The SEAL team's helicopter appeared on his primary display as a green icon moving steadily toward the target area. 12 elite operators crammed into an aircraft that represented their only way home, trusting their lives to a pilot they'd never met, and a mission plan developed by people who'd never pulled triggers in anger. The weight of that responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like familiar armor, heavy, necessary, and impossible to ignore. "Phoenix, this is Reaper," Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system. "We're 15 minutes from insertion. What's your picture of the target area?" His tone was professional now, the earlier mockery replaced by the focused intensity that defined special operations personnel when lives were at stake. Marcus studied the multiple camera feeds streaming from the Reaper's sensor package. "Reaper, I count 22 personnel signatures in and around the main compound. Vehicles positioned at probable escape routes, armed sentries at key observation points, and what appears to be a rooftop lookout post with direct-fire weapons." Each detail was delivered with clinical precision, intelligence that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The compound looked different through thermal imaging, a collection of heat signatures representing human lives that would soon become targets or casualties, depending on their choices in the next few hours. Marcus had learned to compartmentalize the human element of remote warfare, focusing on tactical requirements rather than emotional implications. But late at night, alone in his quarters, he sometimes wondered about the families of the people whose lives he'd ended with Hellfire missiles and precision-guided munitions. "Copy all, Phoenix," Morrison acknowledged. "Looks like intelligence estimates were conservative. We're going to need real-time updates once we're on the ground." The admission carried unspoken recognition that the drone operator they dismissed hours earlier was now a critical component of mission success. Attitudes changed quickly when survival was at stake. Through his sensor feeds, Marcus watched the helicopter approach the landing zone, a flat section of desert terrain approximately half a mile from the target compound. The insertion had to be far enough away to avoid immediate detection, while close enough to allow rapid movement to the objective. The mathematics of special operations warfare, where every variable was measured in meters and minutes rather than miles and hours. 30 seconds to insertion, the helicopter pilot announced over the tactical frequency. The SEALs would be conducting final equipment checks, mental preparation for the violence that lay ahead, and quiet prayers to whatever deities watched over warriors in hostile territory. Marcus had never experienced that particular form of courage, the willingness to step directly into harm's way with nothing but training, equipment, and teammates for protection. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and rotor wash, disgorging its human cargo with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, the SEALs had established a defensive perimeter and begun their movement toward the compound. Marcus tracked their progress through thermal imaging, noting their professional spacing and coordinated advance. Whatever else could be said about their attitudes, these men were consummate professionals when mission requirements demanded competence over personality conflicts. "Phoenix, this is Reaper. We're moving to Phase 1, Morrison transmitted as his team approached the compound's outer security perimeter. Phase 1 involved neutralizing sentries and establishing positions for the main assault. Success required perfect coordination between ground forces and aerial support, with no margin for miscommunication or technical failure. Marcus's attention split between multiple information streams: the SEAL's tactical radio network, satellite imagery showing the broader operational area, weapon system status indicators, and his personal communication link with the Mission Command Center. Each feed provided critical information, but processing them simultaneously required the kind of mental dexterity that separated competent operators from exceptional ones. The first contact came without warning, muzzle flashes erupting from the compound's defensive positions as alert sentries detected the approaching SEALs. The carefully planned stealth approach had lasted exactly 14 minutes before dissolving into the chaos that defined combat operations. Plans were guidelines. Reality was improvisation under pressure. Contact, contact, contact. Ghost Chen's voice cut through the radio static. Multiple shooters, fortified positions, requesting immediate fire support on grid coordinates. I'm transmitting now. The professional calm in his voice belied the deadly situation unfolding on the ground. The SEALs were pinned down by overlapping fields of automatic weapons fire, their advance stalled within sight of their objectives. Marcus didn't hesitate. Reaper, Phoenix has eyes on your position. Stand by for danger close fire support. He was already adjusting the Reaper's flight path, bringing weapon systems online, calculating wind drift and target elevation with computer precision. Danger close meant friendly forces were within the minimum safe distance for ordnance employment, a situation that turned mathematical precision into life-or-death accuracy. The Hellfire missile streaked downward through the pre-dawn darkness, its guidance system locked onto laser energy invisible to human eyes but clear as daylight to sophisticated sensors. The explosion illuminated the compound like artificial sunrise, concrete and steel disintegrating under focused violence, designed to eliminate specific threats while minimizing collateral damage. Outstanding shooting, Phoenix. Morrison's voice carried newfound respect. You just cleared our path to the primary objective. The grudging acknowledgement represented more than tactical gratitude. It was recognition that competence transcended service boundaries and personal prejudices. When lives hung in the balance, results mattered more than preconceived notions about who belonged in combat operations. The SEALs advanced through the gap created by Marcus's precision strike, their movement fluid and coordinated despite the hostile fire continuing from secondary positions. Room-to-room clearing in a fortified compound tested every aspect of their training, but they moved with the confidence that comes from knowing Overwatch support was available when needed. Phoenix, we've got movement in the underground levels, Santos reported from her sensor operator position. Thermal signatures suggest personnel moving through what might be tunnel systems. The intelligence implications were significant. If high-value targets could escape through underground routes, the entire mission might fail despite tactical success on the surface. Marcus adjusted sensor parameters to penetrate the compound structure, using advanced imaging techniques to map internal layouts invisible to conventional surveillance. The underground complex was more extensive than intelligence had suggested, with multiple levels, and what appeared to be vehicle access points that could facilitate rapid escape. Reaper, be advised we have extensive underground movement, Marcus transmitted to Morrison. Recommend blocking suspected egress points before primary targets can escape through alternate routes. It was tactical advice from someone who'd never set foot in the target area to operators currently under fire, but the drone sensors provided perspectives unavailable to ground forces. Morrison's response came between bursts of automatic weapons fire. Roger, Phoenix, can you put ordnance on those escape routes? The request carried implicit trust in Marcus's abilities, trust that had been earned through demonstrated competence rather than pre-mission confidence. The challenge was significant. destroying underground exit points without causing structural collapse that might trap the SEALs inside the compound. It required precise placement of explosive effects, careful calculation of blast patterns, and more than a little luck that the building's construction could withstand surgical violence. Marcus selected smaller diameter weapons, precision munitions designed for exactly these circumstances. Reaper, Phoenix is engaging suspected tunnel exits with small diameter bombs. Recommend you expedite movement to primary objectives before targets realize their escape routes are compromised. The explosions were less spectacular than the earlier Hellfire strike, but equally effective in their intended purpose. Underground passages collapsed in carefully controlled demolitions, sealing escape routes while leaving the main structure intact. The arms dealers were now trapped inside their fortress, forced to fight rather than flee. Jackpot, jackpot, jackpot. Chen's voice carried excitement that professional soldiers rarely allowed themselves to express. We have eyes on multiple HVTs, main level, northeast corner. High-value targets had been located, the primary objective of an operation that had risked a dozen American lives and millions of dollars in equipment and operational costs. But identifying targets was different from capturing them. The arms dealers weren't going to surrender quietly to foreign special operations forces, especially when surrender meant spending the rest of their lives in maximum security prisons. The compound erupted in defensive fire as its occupants realized their situation had shifted from routine security to life-or-death combat. Marcus monitored the tactical situation through multiple sensor feeds, his attention split between immediate fire support requirements and broader situational awareness. Other aircraft were operating in the region, fighters providing high-altitude cover, electronic warfare platforms disrupting enemy communications, and medical evacuation helicopters standing by in case the worst happened. The radio crackled with urgent transmissions as the situation evolved rapidly, taking fire from second-story windows. Breaching charges set on the main entrance. Need immediate suppression on the rooftop position. Each transmission painted a picture of controlled violence as professional soldiers adapted to fluid circumstances while maintaining focus on mission objectives. Marcus's role had evolved from simple overwatch to active participant in the unfolding battle. His weapons systems engaged targets identified by the ground team, providing precise fire support that allowed the SEALs to advance through defended positions. The drone sensors tracked personnel movements, identified weapons emplacements, and provided intelligence that was immediately actionable. Phoenix, this is Reaper. Morrison's voice carried strain that suggested the mission wasn't proceeding according to plan. We need immediate fire support on a hardened bunker position that's got us pinned down. Grid coordinates follow. The transmission was followed by technical data that translated the chaotic battlefield into mathematical precision. The bunker was a reinforced concrete structure built into the compound's foundation, designed to withstand exactly the kind of assault the SEALs were conducting. Standard munitions would be ineffective against its hardened construction, but Marcus had options available that could penetrate virtually any protective barrier. Reaper, Phoenix is engaging with Bunker Buster Penetrator warhead. Recommend all friendly personnel maintain maximum distance from target structure. The warning gave the SEALs time to seek cover before the specialized weapon delivered its devastating payload through layers of concrete and steel. The explosion was different from conventional ordnance, a focused blast that punched through the bunker's roof before detonating inside the protected space. The defensive position that had dominated the compound's southwestern approach simply ceased to exist, along with everyone inside it. Phoenix, that was surgical, Morrison transmitted. You just opened our path to the primary objective. The words carried more than tactical appreciation. They represented acknowledgement that the single father they'd mocked in the briefing room was proving instrumental in mission success. As the SEALs pressed their assault, Marcus found himself thinking about his son's upcoming custody hearing. The irony was painful. He was demonstrating exceptional skill in combat operations, while his ex-wife's attorneys argued that military service made him an unfit parent. The same dedication that kept special operations teams alive was being used as evidence that he couldn't provide stable home environment for a 7-year-old boy. The mission continued with brutal efficiency. High-value targets were systematically located, isolated, and either captured or eliminated depending on their level of resistance. Intelligence materials were gathered from computer systems and document storage areas. The arms trafficking network that had supplied weapons across 3 continents was being dismantled one room at a time. "Phoenix, we've got wounded." Chen's voice cut through the tactical chatter with grim urgency. "Need immediate medical evacuation for 1 urgent surgical and 2 priority casualties." The words every support element dreaded, friendly forces requiring immediate medical attention beyond what field medics could provide. Marcus's response was immediate. "Reaper, Phoenix is coordinating medical evacuation. Stand by for helicopter approach to your position." But coordinating medevac meant more than just calling for help. It meant providing security for the most vulnerable phase of any combat operation. The medical evacuation helicopter appeared on Marcus's sensor display, approaching the compound under cover of darkness and defensive fire. The pilot was making the same kind of courage under fire decision that defined special operations, accepting significant personal risk to save wounded teammates. Marcus provided overwatch for the medevac operation, his weapons systems tracking potential threats while the helicopter landed under hostile fire. The wounded SEALs were loaded aboard with efficient brutality, no time for gentleness when lives depended on speed, and the enemy was actively trying to prevent medical evacuation. "Dust-off complete," the helicopter pilot transmitted as he lifted off with 3 wounded Americans aboard. "En route to forward surgical team." The successful medical evacuation represented more than just wounded personnel receiving treatment. It demonstrated that the support network functioned effectively under the worst possible circumstances. With casualties evacuated, the remaining SEALs continued their mission with the focused intensity that defined professional soldiers. They'd lost 3 teammates to enemy fire, but the primary objectives remained unchanged. High-value targets still needed to be captured or killed, intelligence still needed to be gathered, and the arms trafficking network still needed to be disrupted. Marcus monitored the SEALs' progress through the compound's remaining structures, providing real-time intelligence about personnel movements and potential threats. His drone's sophisticated sensors could detect heartbeats through walls, track individual weapon signatures, and identify concealed defensive positions that might otherwise surprise the ground team. "Phoenix, we're moving to the final objective area," Morrison transmitted. "Intelligence suggests the primary HVT is barricaded in a hardened room with multiple bodyguards. We're going to need your help with this one." The request represented complete integration of drone support with ground operations, exactly the kind of coordination that made American Special Operations Forces so effective. The final assault required careful choreography between ground forces and aerial support. Marcus's sensors identified the exact location of personnel within the barricaded room, while the SEALs positioned breaching charges and prepared for what would likely be a fierce firefight in confined spaces. "Phoenix has thermal imagery showing 6 personnel in the target room," Marcus reported. "Primary HVT appears to be positioned behind what looks like an armored desk in the room's northeast corner. Bodyguards are distributed around likely breach points." Morrison's acknowledgement was terse. "Copy all. Stand by to provide precision fire support through the roof if we call for it." The request was asking Marcus to put ordnance through the building's roof without killing friendly forces who would be breaching from below, the kind of precision that separated competent operators from artists. The breaching charges detonated simultaneously, blowing holes through reinforced walls and filling the room with smoke and debris. The SEALs poured through the openings with practiced violence, their movements coordinated through hundreds of hours of training and real-world experience. The firefight lasted 17 seconds, an eternity measured in heartbeats and muzzle flashes. When the shooting stopped, 5 bodyguards were dead and the primary high-value target was wounded but alive. Mission success, measured in objectives achieved and Americans brought home safely. Jackpot confirmed, Morrison transmitted with professional satisfaction. Primary HVT is secured, along with significant intelligence materials, requesting immediate extraction for personnel and captured materials. The words represented the successful conclusion of an operation that had risked everything on surgical precision and exceptional coordination. Marcus continued providing overwatch as the SEALs prepared for extraction, his sensors monitoring for potential reinforcements or last-minute threats that might compromise their withdrawal. The compound was secure, but the mission wouldn't be complete until everyone was safely back at base. The extraction helicopter arrived 23 minutes later, its crew displaying the same courage that had characterized the entire operation. Landing in a potentially hostile area to recover special operations forces required pilots willing to accept significant personal risk for the successful completion of their teammates' mission. As the helicopter lifted off with its precious cargo of SEALs and captured intelligence materials, Marcus felt the familiar mixture of relief and accomplishment that followed successful operations. 12 high-value targets had been eliminated or captured, a major arms trafficking network had been disrupted, and most importantly, American forces were returning home alive. The flight back to base passed in contemplative silence over the tactical radio network. The SEALs processed their mission in individual ways, what had gone according to plan, what had required improvisation, what lessons would inform future operations. Each man dealt with the aftermath of combat according to his own psychological mechanisms. Morrison's voice cut through the post-mission quiet. "Phoenix, this is Reaper. On behalf of my team, I want to thank you for exceptional support throughout this operation. Your precision and tactical awareness saved American lives tonight." The formal acknowledgement meant more than any medal or commendation. It was recognition from peers who understood the demands of combat operations. Marcus's response was characteristically understated. "Just doing my job, Reaper. Glad I could help bring everyone home." But both men understood that it had been far more than routine duty. The single father who'd been mocked in the briefing room had demonstrated skills that had proved instrumental in mission success. The after-action reports would document Marcus's exceptional performance in clinical terms: precision engagement of multiple targets, effective coordination of fire support with ground operations, successful integration of drone capabilities with special operations requirements, military bureaucracy translating combat effectiveness into administrative language. But the real recognition came in smaller, more meaningful ways. Ghost Chen sent a personal message thanking Marcus for the fire support that had saved his life during the initial contact. Other SEALs made similar acknowledgments, professional soldiers recognizing competence regardless of service branch or personal circumstances. The mission's success generated intelligence that would fuel months of follow-up operations. The captured arms dealer provided information about trafficking networks, supply routes, and financial systems that sustained terrorist organizations across multiple regions. One night's work had created opportunities for strategic disruption of enemy capabilities. Marcus returned to his quarters as dawn broke over the base, exhaustion settling into his bones with familiar weight. The successful mission was already being analyzed by intelligence professionals, tactical experts, and senior commanders who would extract every possible lesson from the night's events. Alone in his small room, Marcus pulled out his phone and stared at the photograph of his son that served as his wallpaper. Tomorrow he would video call Jake before the boy left for school, pretending that Daddy's job was routine and safe rather than dangerous and necessary. The custody hearing was still scheduled for next week, regardless of his professional accomplishments. Sleep came eventually, filled with dreams of tactical displays and radio transmissions, precision strikes and successful extractions. The subconscious mind processing recent trauma while filing away experiences that would inform future decisions when lives again hung in the balance of split-second choices. The base's secure communication system delivered a message 2 days later. Jake Kellerman had suffered another severe asthma attack and was hospitalized in critical condition. Marcus's ex-wife was demanding immediate custody modification, claiming his military deployments made him unable to provide adequate care for a chronically ill child. Colonel Hayes approved immediate emergency leave without question, understanding that family crises didn't pause for operational requirements. The same officer who just demonstrated exceptional skill under combat conditions was now racing home to fight a different kind of battle in family court. The custody hearing became a clash between two worldviews, his ex-wife's attorneys arguing that military service made him an unreliable parent, while Marcus's legal team countered that his military skills translated directly into protective parenting. The judge seemed unimpressed by testimony about precision drone strikes when the primary concern was bedtime stories and pediatric appointments. Marcus lost primary custody but retained visitation rights, a legal compromise that satisfied no one but reflected the court's belief that military service was inherently incompatible with single parenting. The irony was painful. The same skills that had kept Special Operations Forces alive were deemed irrelevant to raising his own son. Returning to duty after the custody hearing required compartmentalization that would have impressed his former psychology instructors. Personal pain remained locked away, while professional competence continued unabated. The mission always came first, even when the mission felt meaningless compared to tucked-in bedtime routines and morning breakfast conversations. Morrison sought him out during his first week back, finding Marcus in the Drone Operations Center during a routine training exercise. The SEAL team leader's normally confident demeanor seemed subdued as he approached the workstation where Marcus was guiding a practice mission. "Sergeant, I heard about your custody situation," Morrison said quietly. "For what it's worth, I think the judge made a mistake. Your performance during our operation demonstrated exactly the kind of focus and reliability that makes someone a good parent." The words were awkward, delivered by a warrior who was more comfortable with tactical planning than emotional support. Marcus's response was professionally neutral. "Appreciate that, Commander, but the court has made its decision, and I'll adapt accordingly." The military's standard approach to unfavorable circumstances: acknowledge reality, adapt to new conditions, continue mission accomplishment despite personal setbacks. 6 months later, Marcus received orders for deployment to a forward operating base in Africa, supporting counterterrorism operations across the Sahel region. The assignment was recognition of his exceptional skills, but it also meant even less time with his son. Military advancement often came at personal cost. The deployment proved his capabilities on a larger scale. Marcus provided drone support for dozens of special operations missions, his precision and tactical awareness becoming legendary among units that had worked with him. The single father who'd been mocked by SEALs was now requested by name for the most challenging operations. His professional reputation grew through demonstrated competence rather than self-promotion. Other drone operators studied his techniques, trying to understand how he achieved such consistent accuracy under pressure. Military trainers incorporated his methods into instruction programs, spreading his expertise throughout the remote pilot community. but personal recognition felt hollow compared to missed birthdays and school events experienced through video calls. Jake was growing up in his absence, forming memories that didn't include his father's presence. The cost of military excellence was measured in lost moments that could never be recovered. The final mission of Marcus's deployment came without fanfare: routine support for a SEAL team conducting reconnaissance in disputed territory. Intelligence suggested terrorist movement through a remote valley, but initial surveillance revealed only civilian traffic and normal agricultural activity. The operation seemed straightforward until Marcus's sensors detected something that changed everything. A convoy of vehicles moving in tactical formation toward a village where displaced families had sought refuge from regional fighting. The lead vehicle's thermal signature suggested heavy weapons, while communications intercepts indicated planning for what appeared to be a massacre. Marcus found himself faced with a moral and tactical dilemma that transcended standard operating procedures. The SEAL team was positioned to observe and report, not to intervene in what appeared to be impending atrocities against civilian populations. But his drone carried enough ordnance to stop the convoy before it reached the village. The decision had to be made in minutes, not hours. Requesting permission through official channels would take too long, but acting without authorization could end his military career and result in court-martial proceedings. The lives of innocent civilians weighed against his professional future and his son's financial security. Marcus made the choice that defined him as both a warrior and a father. He engaged the convoy with maximum force, destroying every vehicle before they could reach the village. 43 armed militants died in the precision strikes, while an estimated 300 civilian lives were saved from potential massacre. The aftermath was predictably complex. Marcus faced investigation for exceeding his authority, while simultaneously receiving commendation for preventing civilian casualties. The military justice system struggled to balance disciplinary requirements with recognition of lives saved through individual initiative. The investigation concluded with a formal reprimand for failing to follow proper authorization procedures, coupled with a Bronze Star Medal for exceptional service in combat operations. Military bureaucracies attempt to acknowledge both the violation of protocol and the successful protection of innocent lives. Marcus's military career continued, but with the understanding that he'd reached his ceiling for advancement. The same moral courage that had saved civilian lives had also marked him as someone willing to prioritize human considerations over procedural compliance. Future assignments would reflect that assessment. Years later, teaching drone operations at a training facility in Nevada, Marcus would tell young pilots about the importance of technical precision while never forgetting the human element of remote warfare. His lessons emphasized that every missile launched and every target engaged represented real consequences for real people. The SEALs he'd supported during that first mission had gone on to other operations, other conflicts, other challenges. But Morrison made a point of visiting whenever he was in the area, maintaining the professional relationship that had begun with mockery and evolved into mutual respect. Their conversations invariably returned to that night in Syria, when a single father's precision had kept 12 elite operators alive. Morrison would describe Marcus's performance to younger SEALs, using it as an example of how competence transcended service boundaries and personal circumstances. Jake Kellerman grew up knowing his father as a weekend visitor rather than a constant presence, but their relationship retained the close bond that had sustained them through medical emergencies and custody battles. Video calls and brief visits became precious opportunities to maintain connection across the distances created by military service. At 17, Jake asked his father about the custody battle that had shaped both their lives. Marcus explained the legal system's decision in terms a teenager could understand, while acknowledging that his military commitments had indeed created challenges for single parenting. The conversation was painful but necessary. Jake's response surprised him. "Dad, I've always been proud of what you do. Keeping people safe is more important than being at every soccer game." The teenager had developed his own understanding of sacrifice and service, recognizing that his father's absence had served larger purposes. Marcus retired from military service after 22 years, his final assignment teaching advanced drone operations to the next generation of remote pilots. His legacy was measured not in rank achieved or decorations earned, but in lives saved through exceptional skill applied under impossible circumstances. The retirement ceremony was small but meaningful, attended by SEALs who'd served with him, pilots he'd trained, and commanders who'd learned to trust his judgment despite initial skepticism. Morrison spoke about the night a single father had proved that competence mattered more than preconceptions. In his final address to the training squadron, Marcus offered advice that transcended technical procedures. "Remember that every mission involves real people whose lives hang in the balance of your decisions. Precision isn't just about hitting targets. It's about bringing everyone home safely while protecting those who can't protect themselves." Jake attended his father's retirement ceremony, now a young man who understood the cost of service and the weight of responsibility that came with protecting others. Father and son had found their way to mutual respect despite the challenges created by military life and family court decisions. Marcus's post-military career involved consulting work with defense contractors, helping to improve drone technology and training programs. His expertise was valued precisely because it combined technical competence with operational experience and ethical considerations that came from real-world application. The single father who'd been mocked by SEALs had become a legend within special operations circles, not for his initial treatment, but for his response to it. His story became an example of how individual excellence could overcome prejudice, and how dedication to mission accomplishment could coexist with personal integrity. Years after that first briefing room encounter, Marcus received a wedding invitation from Ghost Chen, now medically retired from the SEALs but working as a law enforcement instructor. The handwritten note thanked him again for the precision fire support that had saved lives during multiple operations. The wedding was small but filled with warriors who'd shared the unique bond that comes from facing death together. Marcus found himself surrounded by people who understood the costs of service and the satisfaction that came from missions accomplished despite overwhelming odds. Morrison, now a senior chief with multiple deployments behind him, raised a toast to the single father who taught special operations forces that competence could come from unexpected sources. The room filled with knowing laughter as he described their first meeting and its contrast with subsequent operational reality. The evening's conversations inevitably turned to current conflicts, new technologies, and the evolving nature of warfare. But the underlying theme remained constant: individual excellence applied in service of something larger than personal ambition or recognition. Marcus listened to the stories being shared around him, accounts of missions accomplished, friends lost, and lessons learned through experience that couldn't be taught in class.